I never thought I'd be there, spilling my guts to a bunch of strangers on the internet. But here I am, 35 years old, and my life's gone to shit. Everything I believed turned to dust in one moment. It all started about 6 months ago. I was living what I thought was the American dream: decent job, nice house in the suburbs, and Amanda, my wife of 7 years. We met in college, fell head over heels, and married right after graduation. I thought we had it all figured out. Amanda worked as a real estate agent, and I was climbing the corporate ladder at a software development company. We weren't T-rich, but we were comfortable. We had date nights every Friday, weekend getaways when we could afford them, and we were even talking about starting a family. Life was good, or so I thought. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Amanda started coming home later and later, always with some excuse about a client or a showing that ran long. She'd be on her phone constantly, smiling at texts and hiding the screen when I walked by. But I didn't want to believe the worst, so made an excuses. My world changed that one day in May. I took a half day off work to surprise Amanda for our anniversary. I picked up flowers, her favorite chocolates, and even spent on a bottle of fancy champagne. I was feeling pretty good about myself, imagining her face when she saw me. But when I pulled into our driveway, there was another car there, a sleek black Mercedes that definitely didn't belong to any of our friends. My stomach dropped, but I told myself it was probably just a client. I mean, what else could it be, right? I opened the front door quietly, thinking I'd surprise her in the middle of a meeting. Christ, I wish that had been the case. Instead, I heard noises. You know the kind I am talking about, coming from our fucking bedroom. I stood there frozen, flowers hanging limply from my hand. Part of me wanted to burst in there to confront them, but another part, the part that was already breaking, couldn't bear to see it. So I did the cowardly thing. I left. I got in my car and just drove. I ended up at a bar across town, downing whiskey after whiskey, trying to drown out the images in my head. By the time I stumbled home, it was past midnight. Amanda was waiting up, worry etched on her face. Can you believe that? She had the audacity to look worried about me. Jake, where have you been? I've been calling you for hours, she said, rushing towards me. I just looked at her, this woman I thought I knew, and laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when you are tiptoeing on the edge of sanity. How was your afternoon, Amanda? I asked, with my words slurring a bit. Had a good meeting? Her face went pale. She knew that I knew. Jake, I can explain, she stammered. Oh, I bet you can, I spat. Let me guess. It's not what it looks like? It didn't mean anything? Save it, Amanda. I heard you. In our bedroom, on our anniversary. She started crying then with dramatic sobs. I'm so sorry, Jake. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far. How long? She hesitated, and I knew it was bad. 3 months, she whispered. 3 months, a quarter of a year. While I was planning our future, she was screwing someone else. The betrayal hit me physically. Who is he? I demanded. Amanda hesitated at first, but gave in his name S. Robert. He is one of my clients. A real estate investor, of course. Rich, probably older. Everything I wasn't T. I want you out, I said calmly. Tonight. Go to your sister S, a hotel, I don't care. Just get out. She tried to argue, to explain, but I was done listening. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket and headed for the couch. As I laid there, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder how we'd gotten here. How had I been so blind? The next few weeks were a blur. Amanda moved out, staying with her sister while we figured out the divorce. There was no coming back from this, no matter how much she cried and apologized. She broke my trust, and I couldn't reinvent it. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and taking on extra projects. Anything to keep my mind off the empty house and the shattered remains of my marriage. But even that wasn't enough. My performance started slipping. I missed deadlines, make careless mistakes. My boss, Dave, called me into his office one day. Jake, what's going on with you? He asked, concern evident in his voice. This isn't like you. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I am going through a divorce, Dave. Amanda, she cheated on me. Dave's face softened. I'm sorry to hear that, Jake. Really, I am. But you can let it affect your work like this. We've got clients to keep happy. I nodded, promising to do better, but it was a promise I couldn't keep. The mistakes kept piling up, and so did the warnings. It all came to a head about 2 months after Amanda left. I was working on a major software update for a big client. It was make or break stuff, the kind of project that could put us on the map. But I was distracted, thinking about the meeting with my lawyer later that day. I pushed the update live, without running all the necessary tests. You can probably guess what happened next. The update crashed the client's entire system, costing them hours of downtime and a significant amount of money. It was a disaster. Dave called me into his office again, but this time there was no concern in his eyes, just disappointment and pity. "Jake, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "This mistake with the Wilson account. It's the last straw. We can't afford these kinds of errors." And just like that, I was unemployed, soon to be divorced, and living in a house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Rock bottom? Yeah, I was pretty much there. As I packed up my desk, ignoring the pitying looks from my coworkers, I couldn't help but wonder how things had gone so wrong so fast. I drove home in a daze, barely noticing the familiar streets and houses. When I got home, I just sat in my car, staring at the house Amanda and I had bought together, filled with dreams of the future that now lay in ruins. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears at that point. I just felt empty. Like she had scooped out everything that made me who I was and left behind this shell of a person. As I finally dragged myself into the house, my phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. "Jake, can we talk? I miss you." Robert turned out to be a mistake. "Please, give me another chance." I stared at the message, a bitter laugh. Of fucking course. Now that her rich boy toy had dumped her, she wanted to come crawling back. Well, too bad. I might be down, but I wasn't out. And I sure as hell wasn't stupid enough to fall for her games again. I typed out a response, my fingers shaking slightly. "No, Amanda, we are done. For good. Don T. contact me again unless it asks through our lawyers." As I hit send, I felt something shift inside me. A tiny spark of something. Not quite hope, not yet. But maybe the first step towards it. I looked around the empty house, at the life I'd built and lost, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. I felt angry, and beneath that anger was a determination I thought I'd lost. For the next few weeks, I was a mess. I'd wake up, stare at the ceiling for hours, then drag myself to the kitchen for a sad bowl of cereal. Sometimes I'd forget to eat at all. The house felt like a tomb, filled with memories I couldn't escape. One particularly bleak Tuesday, I realized I hadn't left the house in days. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and barely recognized the guy staring back. That when it hit me I couldn't go on like this. I showered, shaved, and forced myself to step outside. The sun was almost offensively bright. I started walking without real destination in mind, just walking step by step. Before I knew it, I wandered into a part of town I rarely visited. It was busier here, people rushing about their day. For a moment, I felt invisible. Just another face in the crowd. It was oddly comforting. That when I saw a for rent sign in the window of a small storefront. It was placed between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop, not far from the local hospital. Something about it caught my eye. I peered through the dusty window. It was empty inside, but I could see the potential. High ceilings, exposed brick walls, plenty of natural light. Without really thinking about it, I jotted down the number on the sign. As I stood there, I overheard a conversation between two nurses walking by. "God, I'd kill for a decent cup of coffee around here," one of them groaned. "Tell me about it," her friend replied. "The hospital cafeteria stuff is like drinking motor oil." A light bulb went off in my head. A coffee shop. Here, right next to the hospital. It was crazy, right? I mean, what did I know about running a business? But the idea wouldn't let go. I called the number on the spot. The landlord, a gruff-sounding guy named Frank, agreed to meet me there in an hour. While I waited, my mind raced. I'd always loved coffee. Back in college, ID worked part-time at a cafe to make ends meet. I remembered the satisfaction of serving people, the rhythm of the espresso machine, the smell of freshly ground beans. Frank showed up, keys jangling. "So, you interested in renting?" he asked, eyeing me suspiciously. I nodded, trying to look more confident than I felt. "Thinking of opening a coffee shop," I said. He grunted, unlocking the door. "Lot of work, running your own place. You sure you're up for it?" Good question. Was I? A month ago, I had a stable job and a wife. Now I was considering blowing my savings on a pipe dream. But as I stepped inside, something just felt right. "Yeah?" I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "I think I am." We talked numbers. The rent wasn't cheap, but it was doable, especially with the money from selling the house. I'd been planning to move out anyway, too many memories. Before I knew it, I was signing a lease. Frank handed me the keys with a hint of a smile on his face. "Good luck, kid," he said. "You're gonna need it." As soon as he left, realization hit me like a truck. What the hell had I just done? I knew nothing about running a business. I had no plan, no experience, no idea where to even start. I sank to the floor, my back against the dusty wall. What if this was a huge mistake? But then I thought about the alternative. Going back to that empty house, letting myself wallow in misery and self-pity. At least this way, I was doing something, taking a chance. I pulled out my phone and started Googling how to start a coffee shop equipment, small business loans. My head was spinning, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of excitement. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I threw myself into research, learning everything I could about coffee, business management, local health codes, you name it. I cashed out my $401k, probably not the smartest financial move, and started hunting for secondhand equipment. I found an old espresso machine that needed some TLC, but I got it for a steal. Tables and chairs came from garage sales and thrift stores. I painted the walls myself, a warm, inviting brown with accents of deep red. Choosing a name was tough. I wanted something simple, unpretentious. In the end, I settled on Jake S. Place. Nothing fancy, but it felt right. As opening day approached, the panic started to set in. What if no one came? What if my coffee sucked? What if this whole thing was just a terribly stupid idea? The night before the opening, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, imagining all the ways things could go wrong. Finally, at about 4 a.m., I gave up and headed to the shop. I cleaned everything again, even though it was already spotless. I went over the menu for the 100th time. I made sure the cash register was working, the coffee grinder was full, the pastry case was stocked. As the sun started to rise, I took a deep breath and flipped the sign on the door to open. For the first hour, nothing happened. I stood behind the counter, heart pounding, waiting for my first customer. When the bell above the door finally jingled, I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was one of the nurses I'd overheard that day weeks ago. She looked exhausted, probably just off a night shift. "You knew?" she asked, eyeing the menu. I nodded, trying not to look as nervous as I felt. Just opened. "What can I get you?" "Largest coffee you've got," she said, black as night. I poured her a cup with slightly shaky hands. She took a sip and closed her eyes for a moment. "Oh, thank God," she sighed. Actual coffee. She paid and left, then stopped at the door saying, "I'll be telling everyone at the hospital about this place." And she did. Over the next few hours, a steady stream of doctors, nurses, and hospital staff came through. By lunchtime, I was running low on pastries and had to start a fresh batch of coffee. It wasn't all smooth. I messed up a few orders, struggled with the espresso machine, and definitely undercharged a couple of people. But overall, it felt good, really good. As I locked up that night, exhausted but encouraged, I realized something. For the first time since Amanda left, I hadn't thought about her all day. I'd been too busy, too focused on my new venture. I looked around at my little coffee shop, and felt a surge of pride. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I built this from nothing, turned my rock bottom into a fresh start. As I walked home that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. I knew there would be challenges ahead. Running a business wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to tomorrow. The next few weeks flew by in a caffeine-fueled blur. I was at the shop before sunrise every day, prepping for the morning rush. By closing time, I'd be dead on my feet, but man, it felt good. Jake's place was starting to build a loyal following. The hospital staff loved having a cozy spot nearby for their coffee fixes. I even started recognizing regulars like Dr. Chen, who always ordered a triple espresso before his surgeries, or Nurse Jenny, who swore by my blueberry muffins. Running a business, I quickly learned, was a whole different game from working a 9-to-5. There were supplier issues, equipment breakdowns, and don't even get me started on the paperwork. Some nights I'd be up till 2 a.m., poring over receipts and trying to make sense of my papers. One particularly rough Monday, the espresso machine decided to go on strike right in the middle of the morning rush. I was sweating, frantically trying to fix it while a line of caffeine-deprived doctors glared at me. Just when I was about to admit defeat, a guy piped up from the back of the line, asking, "Mind if I take a look?" I used to work on these back in college. His name was Mike, and he turned out to be a lifesaver. He made that machine work again in no time. As a thank you, I offered him free coffee for life. He laughed and said he'd just settle for a job application. Hiring Mike was one of the best decisions I ever made. He was a natural with customers and had a knack for latte art that put my sad attempts to shame. Plus, having another set of hands meant I could actually take a day off once in a while. As the weeks turned into months, Jake's place started to feel like home. I added some comfy armchairs in the corner, put up local artists' work on the walls. We even started hosting open mic nights on Thursdays, which became surprisingly popular. One day, as I was wiping down tables after the lunch rush, I caught my reflection in the window. I barely recognized myself. I looked happy, tired, sure, with a few new gray hairs, but happy. It wasn't just the coffee shop, though that was a big part of it. It was the sense of purpose, the feeling that I was building something of my own. Every satisfied customer, every perfectly pulled shot of espresso felt like a tiny victory. Of course, there were still tough days. Days when a rude customer would set my teeth on edge, or when I'd lie awake at night worrying about bills. And yeah, there were moments when thoughts of Amanda would creep in, usually late at night when the shop was quiet and empty. But those moments were getting fewer and farther between. I was moving on. About 6 months after opening, I got an unexpected visitor. It was Robert, Amanda's. Well, I guess you'd call him her ex-lover now. He looked uncomfortable as hell, shifting from foot to foot as he approached the counter. Hey, Jake, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Can we talk for a minute? Part of me wanted to tell him to get lost, but curiosity got the better of me. Sure, I said, nodding towards an empty table in the corner. We sat down, the silence stretching awkwardly between us. Finally, he cleared his throat. Look, I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, he started. You got that right, I muttered. He winced. Yeah, I deserve that. Listen, I wanted to apologize. What happened with Amanda and me, it was wrong. I knew she was married, and I did it anyway. I'm not proud of it. I sat there, stunned. Of all the things I expected him to say, an apology wasn't one of them. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. He sighed. Honestly, guilt, I guess. And, well, Amanda and I, it didn't work out. Turns out a relationship built on cheating isn't exactly stable. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. You don't say. He nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. Anyway, I heard about this place, how well you were doing. I wanted you to know I am sorry, for what it's worth. As he stood to leave, I called him, Hey, Robert. He turned back. Thanks, for the apology, I mean. He gave a small nod and left. I sat there for a while trying to process what had just happened. It didn't change anything, not really. But it felt like closure, I guess. That night, as I was closing up, I realized something. For the first time since the affair, I thought about Amanda without feeling that sharp stab of pain. It was more of a dull ache now, like an old injury that only bothers you when it rains. I looked around my little coffee shop, at the warm lights and the line of gleaming mugs behind the counter. This place, this life I built for myself, it was more than just a rebound or a distraction. It was a fresh start. As I turned the sign to closed and locked up, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was okay. More than okay, actually. I was doing pretty damn well. It was a Tuesday morning. The day started like any other, the smell of fresh pastries and ground coffee filling the air. The morning rush had just died down when she walked in. I didn't notice her at first, too busy wiping down the espresso machine. But when I looked up, my breath caught in my throat. She was gorgeous, in that effortless kind of way. Long, dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a smile that could light up the whole damn city. She was wearing scrubs, so I figured she was from the hospital. "Hi there," she said. "I am new in town, and about a dozen people at the hospital told me I had to try this place." I realized I was staring and quickly snapped out of it. "Oh, welcome to Jake S. place," I stammered, feeling like an awkward teenager. "I am Jake. What can I get you?" She looked through the menu, biting her lip in concentration. How about a vanilla latte and, oh, those muffins. Blueberry, please." As I started on her order, she leaned against the counter looking around the shop. "This place is really nice," she said. "Cozy. How long have you been open?" "About 5 months now," I replied, trying to focus on the latte and not on how pretty she was. Best decision I ever made, opening this place. She smiled, and I swear my heart did a little flip. "Well, the whole hospital staff seems to agree with you. I am Olivia, by the way. Just started my residency at Mercy General." "Nice to meet you, Olivia," I said, handing her the latte and muffin. "Welcome to the neighborhood." She took a sip of the latte and closed her eyes for a moment. "Oh, wow," she sighed. "Okay, yeah, I can see why everyone raves about this place." I couldn't help but smile. "Glad you like it. The muffins on the house consider it a welcome to the neighborhood gift." Her eyes lit up. "Really? That is so sweet, thank you." She lingered for a bit, asking about the shop and the area. I found myself telling her about how I started the place, carefully omitting the whole cheating ex-wife part of the story. As she was leaving, she turned back with a smile. "I have a feeling I'm going to become a regular here, Jake. See you tomorrow." I watched her go, feeling like I'd just been hit by a truck, but in a good way, if that makes any sense. True to her word, Olivia became a regular. She'd stop by most mornings before her shift, always with a warm smile, and often with an interesting story about her night at the ER. I found myself looking forward to her visits more and more. We'd chat whenever the shop wasn't too busy, and I started to learn little things about her. She loved old movies and had a cat named Gatsby. She was originally from California but moved here for her residency. She had a wicked sense of humor and could make me laugh like nobody else. Weeks went by and my crush, because let us face it, that S what it was, only grew stronger. But I hesitated to make a move. After Amanda, the idea of putting myself out there again was terrifying. Plus, Olivia was a customer. Wouldn't it be weird to ask her out? Mike, ever observant, picked up on my struggle. "Dude," he said one day after Olivia had left, "when are you gonna ask her out? The tension between you two is making me uncomfortable." I sputtered, nearly dropping the mug I was holding. "What? No, it S not. We were just friendly, that S all." Mike rolled his eyes. "Yeah, right. And I am the Queen of England. Seriously, Jake, she S into you. Take a chance, man." His words stuck with me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was ready to take that leap again. The next morning, I was a bundle of nerves. ID decided today was the day ID asked Olivia out. ID rehearsed what I was going to say about 100 times. When she walked in, my heart started racing. "Morning, Jake," she said cheerfully. "The usual, please." I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. As I made her latte, I tried to summon up the courage to speak. Just as I was about to open my mouth, she beat me to it. "Hey, Jake," she said, sounding a bit nervous herself. "I was wondering, would you maybe want to grab dinner sometime? When you're not, serving dinner to other people?" I stood there, speechless. "I mean, if you're not interested, that's totally fine," she rushed on, misinterpreting my silence. "I just thought, yes!" I bursted out, probably a bit too enthusiastically. "I mean, yes, I'd love to have dinner with you." The smile that lit up her face was brighter than the morning sun streaming through the windows. "Great!" she beamed. "Friday night?" We made plans. and she left for her shift with an extra spring in her step. As soon as she was gone, Mike let out a whoop from behind the pastry case where he'd been not so subtly eavesdropping. "Attaboy, Jake!" he smiled, clapping me on the back. "Told you she was into you." I couldn't stop smiling for the rest of the day. For the first time in a long time, I felt that flutter of excitement, that spark of possibility. As I closed up shop that night, I caught my reflection in the window. The guy looking back at me was smiling, his eyes bright with anticipation. He looked happy, hopeful. He looked ready for whatever came next. Friday night rolled around, and I was a bundle of nerves. I must-have changed my shirt 3 times before settling on a simple button-down. As I locked up the coffee shop, my palms were sweating. It had been so long since I'd been on a real date. I met Olivia at a little Italian place downtown. She looked stunning just in a simple black dress. "Wow," I said, "you look amazing." She blushed slightly. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Jake." The conversation flowed easily over dinner. We talked about everything, her crazy ER stories, my adventures in coffee shop ownership, our favorite books and movies. It felt so natural, so easy. As we were finishing our tiramisu, which I had to admit was almost as good as the one I served at Jake S. place, Olivia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. "Everything okay?" I asked. She sighed. "It's the hospital. They're short-staffed and asking if I can come in." My heart sank a little. "Oh, I understand if you need to go." But Olivia surprised me. She typed out a quick reply and put her phone away. "Nope," she said with a mischievous grin. "I told them I am on a date and can make it. I'm having too good time to leave now." I couldn't help but smile. "Well, in that case, what do you say we get out of here? There's a nice little park nearby if you are up for a walk." She nodded enthusiastically. "That sounds perfect." We strolled through the park, the warm summer night air filled with the scent of flowers. At some point, her hand found mine, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We ended up sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond, talking and laughing until we realized it was past midnight. "I can't believe how late it is," Olivia said, checking her watch. "I've got an early shift tomorrow." "I'll walk you home," I offered, not quite ready for the night to end. At her door, we both hesitated, that awkward first date moment stretching between us. "I had a really great time tonight, Jake," she said softly. "Me too," I replied, my heart racing. "Maybe we could do it again sometime?" She smiled, and before I knew what was happening, she leaned in and kissed me. It was soft and sweet and over far too quickly. "I DD'd like that," she said, a bit breathlessly. "Good night, Jake." I floated home that night, feeling like I was walking on air. Over the next few weeks, Olivia and I saw each other as often as our busy schedules allowed. We'd grab dinner when she wasn't on call, or sometimes she did come to the coffee shop after her shift, and we'd talk while I closed up. One night, about a month after our first date, we were cuddled up on couch watching an old Hitchcock movie. During a lull in the action, Olivia turned to me, her expression serious. "Jake," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, suddenly nervous. "What happened with your ex-wife?" I froze. I'd told Olivia I was divorced, but I'd never gone into the details. The pain of Amanda's betrayal had faded, but it still stung to think about. Taking a deep breath, I told her everything. About catching Amanda cheating, about losing my job, about how opening Jake's place had been my lifeline. When I finished, Olivia was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took my hand. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." I shrugged, trying to play it off. "It is in the past now." She shook her head. "Maybe, but it still affects you. I can see it sometimes, you know? The way you hesitate like you are afraid to let yourself be too happy." I was stunned by her perception. Yeah, I guess you're right." She squeezed my hand. "Jake, I want you to know, I would never do that to you. I really care about you, and I want us to work." In that moment, looking into her eyes, I felt something shift inside me. The last of my walls, the ones I built after Amanda, came crumbling down. I pulled her close and kissed her. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. "I care about you too," I whispered. "So much." That night was the first time we made love. It was tender and passionate and perfect. As we lay there afterwards, Olivia's head on my chest, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The next morning, I woke up before Olivia. I slipped out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake her. In the kitchen, I started making coffee, humming softly to myself. I heard soft footsteps behind me, and then Olivia's arms were around my waist, her chin resting on my shoulder. "Morning," she murmured, pressing a kiss to my neck. I turned in her arms, pulling her close. "Morning, beautiful." As we stood there, bathed in the soft morning light, I felt like my life had finally come full circle. From the depths of betrayal and despair, I found my way back to happiness. The next 2 months were pure bliss. Olivia and I fell into a comfortable rhythm, balancing our busy schedules with our budding relationship. She'd stop by Jake's place during her breaks, and I'd surprise her with her favorite pastries after long shifts. We spent our free evenings exploring the city, trying new restaurants, or just curled up on the couch watching something. One particularly memorable night, we decided to have a picnic in the park, where we ended our first date. I packed a basket with all of Olivia's favorites from the coffee shop, my special blend coffee in a thermos, fresh croissants, and those blueberry muffins she loved so much. As we sat on the blanket, the setting sun painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, Olivia turned to me with a mischievous glimpse in her eye. "You know," she said, a sly smile playing on her lips, "I've always wondered what it would be like to make love under the stars." My heart raced. "Oh, really?" I managed to say, my voice a bit hoarse. She nodded, leaning in close. "What do you say we find out?" We found a secluded spot, hidden from view by a cluster of trees. What followed was one of the most passionate, intense experiences of my life. The thrill of potentially being caught only added to the excitement. Afterwards, we lay there, tangled in each other's arms, staring up at the star-studded sky. I felt happier and more alive than I had in years. "I love you, Jake," Olivia whispered, her head resting on my chest. My heart swelled. "I love you too, Olivia," I replied, meaning it with every fiber of my being. From that night on, our relationship deepened. We started talking about the future moving in together, maybe even marriage someday. For the first time since Amanda, I allowed myself to dream of a life with someone else. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It started subtly. Olivia began canceling our dates more frequently, always with a valid excuse: extra shifts at the hospital, a friend in need, a family emergency. At first, I didn't think much of it. Her job was demanding, after all. Then one day, about 2 weeks after our night in the park, Olivia came into Jake's place looking different. Tired, yes, but there was something else. A sadness in her eyes that I couldn't quite place. "Hey, beautiful," I greeted her with a smile. "Rough shift?" She nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "Yeah, something like that." I frowned, concerned. "Everything okay?" She hesitated, then forced a smile. "Just tired. Can I get my usual?" I made her latte, watching her out of the corner of my eye. Something was definitely off. That night, I surprised her at her apartment with takeout from her favorite Thai place. When she opened the door, she looked shocked to see me. "Jake, I wasn't expecting you." I held up the takeout bags. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up after your rough day." She let me in, but seemed distracted, almost nervous. We ate in relative silence, the tension palpable. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Olivia, what is going on? And don't say nothing. I know you better than that." She set down her fork, her eyes filling with tears. "Jake, I can't do this anymore." My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "There is something I need to tell you, something I should have told you from the beginning." And then she dropped the bombshell. She was married. Her husband, David, had been in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. She moved here for her residency, but also because this hospital had a renowned spinal cord injury program. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she said, tears streaming down her face. "When I met you, David and I, we were in a bad place. The accident changed everything. I felt so alone, so trapped. And then I met you, and you were so kind and funny, and I just got swept up in it all. I sat there, stunned. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had been lying to me this entire time. "Why are you telling me this now?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. She wiped her eyes. "David S. making progress. The doctors think he might regain some function in his legs, and I can't abandon him. He needs me." I felt like I was drowning. "And us? What about us?" She shook her head, fresh tears falling. "I am so sorry, Jake. I love you, I really do. But I made a vow to David, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. I can to break that." I left her apartment in a daze, my world shattered once again. The next few days passed in a blur. I went through the motions at the coffee shop, but inside I was falling apart. A week after Olivia's revelation, I received a voicemail from her. Her voice was shaky, filled with emotion. "Jake, I'm leaving town. David S. being transferred to a specialized facility back home. I know I have no right to ask this of you, but please don't hate me. What we had was real, even if it can continue. I'll never forget you or the happiness you brought into my life. Goodbye, Jake. I'm so sorry." As I listened to her message, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, heartbreak. But underneath it all, there was a small part of me that understood. If our positions were reversed, wouldn't I do the same for her? I realized I became stronger. I survived Amanda's betrayal, built a new life for myself. I would survive this too. As I turned the sign to closed, I took a deep breath. Tomorrow was a new day, and who knew what it might bring? The weeks following Olivia's departure were tough. I threw myself into work, opening Jake's place earlier and closing later. Anything to keep my mind off the ache in my chest. My regulars noticed the change in me. Dr. Chen started lingering over his espresso, sharing stories from his residency days. Nurse Jenny brought in homemade cookies, insisting I needed to put some meat on those bones. Even Mike, usually quick with a joke, treated me with a gentleness that was almost worse than the pain itself. One particularly rough morning, about a month after Olivia left, I was struggling with the espresso machine. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't seem to get the grind right. Frustration bubbled up inside me, and before I knew it, I slammed my fist on the counter, sending cups clattering to the floor. The shop fell silent. I looked up to see concerned faces staring back at me. Embarrassment washed over me, followed quickly by shame. What was I doing? "I'm sorry, folks," I said. We're gonna close early today. Your drinks are on the house." As the last customer filed out, Mike put a hand on my shoulder. "Take the day, boss," he said softly. "I've got this." I nodded, grateful beyond words, and headed to my small office in the back. Collapsing into my chair, I finally let the tears come. I cried for Olivia, for the future we'd never have. I cried for Amanda, for the life I'd lost. I cried for myself, wondering if I was destined to always end up alone. I found myself staring at the corkboard on my wall. It was covered in notes from customers, pictures of regulars, news clippings about Jake's place. My eyes landed on a photo of me on opening day, grinning widely in front of the shop. I barely recognized that guy. He looked so hopeful, so full of life. Then it clicked. I built this place from nothing, turned my lowest point into a fresh start. I splashed some water on my face and headed back out to the front. Mike looked up, surprised to see me. "You okay, Jake?" he asked cautiously. I managed a small smile. "No," I admitted, "but I will be." From that day on, I made a conscious effort to heal. I started seeing a therapist, working through my trust issues and fear of abandonment. I reconnected with old friends, started going to the gym again. Slowly but surely, I felt like I was coming back to life. Jake's place continued to thrive. We expanded our menu, started hosting local art shows, even dabbled in live music on weekends. The place became more than just a coffee shop. It was a community hub, a home away from home for many. About 6 months after Olivia left, I received a letter. My hands shook as I recognized her handwriting on the envelope. For a moment, I considered throwing it away unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a short note and a picture. The note read, "Dear Jake, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted you to know that David has made remarkable progress. He's walking with assistance now, and the doctors are optimistic about his continued recovery. I know it doesn't change anything between us, but I thought you deserved to know that your sacrifice wasn't in vain. You taught me how to love again, Jake, and that gave me the strength to be there for David when he needed me most. I'll always be grateful for that. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. All my love, Olivia." The picture showed Olivia and a man I assumed was David, both smiling as he stood with the help of parallel bars. I stared at the letter for a long time, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. There was sadness, yes, but also a sense of closure. And underneath it all, a glimmer of something that felt a lot like hope. As I walked home, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in a long time. My life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. I'd been betrayed, heartbroken, knocked down more times than I cared to count. But I was still here, still standing, still open to whatever might come next. I'd do exactly what I've been doing all along. I'd wake up tomorrow, open my shop, brew some coffee, and greet the day with open arms. Because life, with all its twists and turns, all its joys and heartbreaks, was still beautiful, and I was ready for whatever it might bring. Thank you for reading this, stranger. I hope my story could help someone to make it through their journey, even if it feels like dead end. It's always a new chapter to come after the end of old one. Stay strong.